Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Clea Paz-Rivera. I'm Clea Paz-Rivera. I work in the Climate and Forest team here in UNDP Climate, and I'm going to be facilitating this session. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this session. We're going to be recording this session only for note-taking purposes. So please, but if anybody has concerns about the recording, you can raise your hand. On behalf of UNDP, Climate Focus, and the UNRED program, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of this NDC guidance, titled Aligning Short-Term Land Sector Actions with Long-Term Climate Goals. This is really a pragmatic guidance that is part of a much longer process to support accelerated implementation and actions at a country level in the land sector, to demonstrate that if we really double and redouble efforts in this decade, we can achieve the long-term targets, but it's necessary really to enhance support in line with the building blocks and the examples that were provided in the guidance. The guidance builds upon concrete case studies and country examples on what is working at a country level. And as I say, it's part of a longer process support that we are supporting to align activities and actions in the forest sector to scale up NDC implementation. I'm gonna show you the agenda now. Can you project the agenda, please? We have prepared an interesting program for you. We're gonna have opening remarks and an introductory presentation walking us through the main elements of the guidance. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with country colleagues and representatives from indigenous peoples that are going to talk concretely how they are already putting in place and implementing some of the actions that are outlined as part of the building blocks of the guidance. So we're going to start with an introductory remarks from Ms. Cassie Flynn, Director of Climate Change here at UNDP. Followed by a presentation by Charlotta Streck, a founding partner and director of Climate Focus. Cassie, you have the floor.
Thank you, Clea, and thank you to everyone who has been able to join this event today. I know how busy this week is, and the idea of crossing a street, getting into a building, up an elevator, and into a meeting room for something like this is now taken on new meaning during UNGA. So I have a lot of gratitude to you for that. And speaking of the Climate Ambition Summit, yesterday we had leaders from nearly 200 countries join us at the United Nations to talk about climate. And the conversation really ebbed and flowed. And in the morning, there was a moment that I don't think I'll ever forget. It was the moment that Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, took the floor. And there had been a lot of conversations about what various countries were doing on climate. And when Prime Minister Mottley took the floor, she sort of leaned back and she crossed her arms and she essentially said, it's time to step up. It's time. We need real progress. We need real action on the ground. And she even went so far, and this got a pretty good reaction from everyone in the room that said, if for those that aren't going to step up, please share with us your scientific research about what it will take to move you and your families to Mars or Pluto. Because what she's getting at there is we don't have any time. We have no time when it comes to the climate crisis. We need action, and we need it now. And this is where I think for UNDP, really starting to internalize that message and saying, okay, we need action, but what is our action? What do we do? And this is where nationally determined contributions and the Paris Agreement have a particular role to play. With NDCs, and UNDP has supported 85% of developing country NDCs, we see a whole set of very promising blueprints These are pledges at the national level that talk about reducing emissions, increasing adaptation, talk about forests. 80% of them talk about forests. There is a new world when you add all of these NDCs together, full of potential and full of the concrete steps that we need to take as a global community. And this is really what sort of brings me to this event today. I am so very proud to be a part of this, because what this guidance does is something that's really important. It draws upon the experiences on the ground. And we have in Colombia and Kenya institutional and multi-sectoral strategies on NDC implementation, DRC and Congo's progress on advancing recognition and legal protection of Indigenous peoples' rights, Cambodia's gender responsive and socially inclusive domestic forest policies. There is so much that this has drawn upon to answer the question that Mia Motley was posing to us, right? Was how are we going to step up? And that's very much how this this publication has been informed. And we're not stopping there. This is not the end of the road, this event. This is the beginning. We're already working with our partners, with the Climate Promise, to advance NDC ambition, to advance NDC implementation in 10 countries on the forest and land use sector, and specifically by strengthening the inclusion of Indigenous people and local communities. Because it's those people that are on the front lines that we need to be supporting and drawing leadership from, taking their lead in these solutions and what we need to do to meet this demand. I think for me, as I'm thinking about this this particular moment in time, what's also important is that this document isn't just a publication. It is a pathway. It is concrete steps that countries can take, developed with immense levels of partnership. I know Climate Focus, we have been working so closely on this, all of our partners with UN Red and of course the UK. This really has resulted over many months and many years of work and experiences that all bring us to this moment. And so I'm very thankful that all of you have been able to join today. Thank you for being on this pathway. And I look forward to this being the beginning as we bring this pathway to life. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cassie. And now I invite Charlotta, please, to give a short presentation that will walk us through the guidance. Thank you.
So we all know that to implement the NDCs, countries have to make significant changes to their policy systems, the legal frameworks. All countries have to do it. We have NDCs that define goals. We have long-term emission strategies that define goals. They're not always aligned, but they clearly speak to the recognition among countries that it is important to include the land sector in particular into the NDCs and the LTCs. However, often it is so that the question is, okay, what to do next, right? We have defined goals. We know where we have to go, but it is not easy to define what are the next steps in the next year, in the next 2 years to take to create an enabling framework for you can already go. Sorry, I don't see where we are here. So should I raise the hand if we go to the next one? Otherwise, so we have over the last year and a half drawn on the experience of countries and relied on a dialogue with countries to define a process and a roadmap decision tool, a decision tool that defines the steps that countries need to take in the short term to bring things on the way, to define, the elements of a effective, efficient, inclusive policy package around the land sector. And it is very important. I will present now the building blocks that we have here defined, but this is only the start. The start is, it gives you a framework, but it is upon all of us, UNDP and all, partners here now to apply this to the country-specific circumstances and make it work. But we all think that it may help to organize the process a bit towards, an enabling environment that then helps to define this policy package. And that includes removing barriers as well as identifying appropriate measures that need to be taken, and then develop the strategies, the policy package, the financing to put this into practice. Now, there are 5 building blocks that we identified. Building block number 1, very good. Cross-sector collaboration. Too much policy making still happens in silos. Individual ministries defining certain policies linked to particular environmental conventions or goals. And that is a problem. It is a problem because it is not resource, efficient, but it is also often not effective. If we have different policies for SDGs and biodiversity and adaptation and mitigation, we lose the opportunity to build synergistic policy packages that combine these goals across all different environmental conventions and targets. It also involves the coordination of policies, includes a prioritization in this process, but also concrete timetables. And of course, the streamlining of climate concerns through all line ministry policies that exist. The second building block is stakeholder engagement. That's, of course, an condition for any kind of good policymaker. But today, too much policy is still formulated in a top-down measure, and then often it lacks an implementation because it doesn't enjoy the acceptance by local communities, indigenous people, and people that are directly affected by these policies. So consulting stakeholders at the local level, but also in the context of national policy making, is essential to create the buy-in from those that are affected by this and have to carry out these policies. It adds to legitimacy and credibility to NDC implementation, and it makes it much more likely that these policies are effectively implemented. And again, we know it all from experience. There are far too many policies that are a plan, a strategy, and are never being implemented, and often because there is not this, national buy-in and support for a certain measure. It also, in consulting stakeholders, also gives the opportunity to hear voices that are otherwise not being heard and bring perspectives that are essential for defining certain measures. Then the building block number 3, institutional, technical, and knowledge capacity building measures. Capacity building is essential, and it is also an ongoing process. Capacity building is not attending a workshop. Capacity building has to become part of the culture of a government and ministries, and that both, at all level of governments, vertically or horizontally. And it needs, we need a culture of learning that constantly improves policies, but it needs to start with a needs assessment. What is needed? What is needed in terms of capacities around the institutional level, individual people, technologies, whatever it is, but then meet these capacity needs and update them. And again, have essentially a process of assessment, evaluation, and continuous building of capacities. And building block number 4, what is needed for all this? Information and data, because only if we base policies on sound information and data, it can actually respond to the needs on the ground. In the case of the forest sector, we talk about, building national, regional, and community foresting monitoring and reporting systems. We also talk about measurement, reporting, and verification of activities that are being taken. And then, of course, you have the information and data that you levy, but then that needs to be linked to indicators towards NDC goals, but also indicators with respect to the evaluation of individual policies. And again, that brings me back to, the need to adjust, everything in this complicated, it's a complicated journey, right? So, and we will never get it right from the beginning. So it is about getting, information and data and improve the system. Increasing transparency this way, in particular also in the forest sector, allows to hold governments accountable, but it also allows us to hold non-state actors accountable, right? So, which is an important part of increasing transparency around policy making more generally. And then building block number 5, finance. Everything is dependent on that. All the policies and measures are only as good as the budgets that are backing them. And that includes domestic budgets, domestic budgets have to be aligned with mitigation targets in the land sector, and international finance to address financing gap. And here it is always good to define policies that are scalable. So as more funding comes in, that one can scale and build on existing policies and increase their in scale and scope. And finally, building an environment that supports private sector investment. And here one example is, for example, this is and I have to say, this is a presentation where we really I only give you the framework. It is up to the panelists and all you to fill this with concrete information. What I give you here is an architecture, a house that needs to be, furnished by all these activities that we are doing. But for example, measures that governments can do in order to identify also areas of deforestation is mandatory corporate disclosure of deforestation risk, which then also can be linked to, identifying which areas in a country, in a region are particularly prone to deforestation and hence, again, more risky to invest. These actions, and you will see that this guide is very practical. It's really more like a decision tool. It is a menu of options that helps decision makers to navigate this, but it is something that needs now to be tailored to the country specific and local circumstances. And in this context, I look now forward to the panelists and participants today and, to learn how these different activities have been applied in your countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotta. And now I'm very pleased to welcome my distinguished panelist, Jorge Mario Rodriguez, Executive Director of FONAFIFO in Costa Rica. Please come join us. Ms. Grace Balawan, Co-Chair of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change and Assistant Program Director of Climate Change and Biodiversity Program at TETEVA. And we're going to have our colleague, Jane Ninguna, Deputy Director of Kenya Forest Research Institute, joining via Zoom if technology allows. We had a colleague that was going to come in person, but you know what happens in this week at the UN. Is she connected? While we connect, may I also remark that we feel, people that are working in forestry, in the forest and land use sector, and I've been hearing this a lot this week, we feel that we've done the homework. We have concrete examples to show how to accelerate short-term actions and what it needs to be done for scaling up. Perhaps what is needed now more is to pass along the message to the other sectors that are not on track. And I'm really keen to hear some concrete examples of what countries and other constituencies, indigenous peoples are already doing, putting in practice these building blocks that Charlotte has explained. So, Jorge Mario, I would like you to I think I'm going to switch to Spanish, given that Jorge Mario is a Spanish speaker, so we are both translated to English and French. Entonces, Jorge Mario, para que fluya mejor la conversación. And Grace, can you hear? You have your headphones? Sorry, we're going to do it because anyway, she was going to speak in Spanish anyway, so you can hear it. 1 second. Are you connected? 1 minute. ¿Está bien? ¿Funciona? ¿Funciona la traducción al inglés? ¿Me pueden? ¿Se escucha en inglés? ¿Está bien? Ok. Gracias. Bueno, Jorge Mario, pues tenemos una historia muy larga con Costa Rica, más de 15 años trabajando en un proceso de preparación a red que incluyó, pues que soy testigo personalmente, en el cual se ha construido toda una arquitectura financiera y todos los elementos para cumplir los requisitos de acceso a financiamiento, de pago por resultados y ahora también a mercados de carbono. Entonces, ¿qué lecciones podrías compartir, dado que Costa Rica realmente ha recorrido este camino y ha implementado ya las acciones y ha mostrado resultados en cuanto a reducción de emisiones en el sector forestal? ¿Qué lecciones de Costa Rica podría compartir en cuanto a la implementación de estos programas y cómo esto se puede integrar como un ejemplo claro y como el liderazgo del sector dentro de la implementación de NDCs? ¿Y qué le podrías decir a los otros países que todavía están empezando o están a mitad del proceso?
Sí, muchas gracias, Clea. Muy buenas tardes a todas y todos. Bueno, con respecto a la pregunta, creo que pudiéramos aquí estar sentados hablando horas de las cosas que eventualmente tenemos que hacer o que hemos hecho. Yo particularmente, por el tiempo que me dan, voy a referirme a cosas concretas y específicas que como país nosotros hemos hecho. Hemos escuchado a Cassie, a Charlotte, de lo que es la ambición, de lo que es la inclusión, de lo que es la necesidad de acelerar cosas. Y yo puedo decirles que Costa Rica, desde 1997, en donde establece una ley forestal, prohíbe el cambio de uso forestal. ¿Qué significa eso? Que el que tenía bosques, si lo cortaba, cometía un ilícito y por lo tanto era penalizado. Desde ahí nosotros, Costa Rica como tal, aspiraba a un desarrollo verde. Creíamos nosotros, y lo hemos oído ya en algunos foros acá, de que definitivamente podemos aspirar a un desarrollo no en contra de los recursos naturales, y Costa Rica ya lo ha demostrado. Pusimos un impuesto al consumo de combustibles fósiles con la intención de trasladarlo a los campesinos, a nuestros indígenas que tienen bosque o que siembran árboles y que ello repercute positivamente con respecto al ambiente. Costa Rica ha tomado empréstitos también, ha tenido acciones en el mercado voluntario para fortalecer esa masa financiera que creemos nosotros ha permitido lograr que Costa Rica se le reconozca a nivel mundial como un ejemplo de lo que es la protección de los bosques. Nosotros hoy por hoy podemos decir con mucho orgullo que hemos invertido y que la inversión que nosotros hemos hecho nos ha dado réditos. Hoy por hoy Costa Rica, el principal fuente de ingresos que tenemos es el ecoturismo, y el ecoturismo está respaldado particularmente en todo un sistema nacional de áreas protegidas, en un sistema de pago por servicios ambientales y un sistema de reconocimiento de esas buenas acciones que se hacen para el ambiente. Hemos también escuchado de parte de Cassie y de Charlotte la necesidad de la inclusión. Bueno, Costa Rica también puede decir que se ha preocupado desde hace muchísimos años en fortalecer la inclusión, no solamente de las mujeres, sino los jóvenes, los hermanos indígenas, para que conjuntamente con el gobierno y con la empresa privada podamos construir ese futuro que nosotros consideramos es el futuro mejor para nuestros niños, para el planeta y para todo el mundo. Entonces, experiencias tenemos muchas. A mí, lastimosamente, y uno viniendo a estos foros, lo que escucha con mucha frecuencia es lo que mucha gente piensa hacer. Y uno lo ve en las NDCs. En las NDCs, según los expertos, sumados, todos no vamos a cumplir con la meta del Acuerdo de París de llegar al 2% o al 1.5%, que es lo ideal, porque falta ambición. Y precisamente esa ambición es la que nosotros tenemos que subrayar, que tenemos que aquí resaltar para decir que necesitamos más compromisos para lograr acciones. Entonces, Clea, no sé cuánto tiempo puedo
Sí, dale.
hablar de eso. Usted me llama la atención, ¿verdad? Pero definitivamente, si queremos nosotros aspirar a cumplir con el Acuerdo de París, a cumplir con tener un mejor ambiente, ¿verdad? Para no solamente para nosotros, en el caso como Costa Rica, sino para el planeta mismo, tenemos que duplicar y triplicar la acción. Tenemos que hacer cosas casi que de forma inmediata y no venir aquí a decir o a los foros internacionales qué es lo que vamos a hacer. Nosotros, yo creo que somos un ejemplo importante que desde hace ya 2, 3 décadas venimos haciendo acciones en pro del ambiente y definitivamente nos ha dado resultados. Definitivamente Costa Rica aspira a que económicamente podamos nosotros tener los ingresos suficientes producto de esas buenas acciones y no necesariamente o no implicaciones negativas en cuanto al ambiente. Costa Rica como tal prohibió la minería a cielo abierto. Costa Rica como tal prohibió la exploración petrolera. Estamos apostando nuevamente a los recursos naturales. ¿Y qué hemos logrado con todo esto? Bueno, probablemente muchos de ustedes conocerán que Costa Rica en la década de los 70 o los 80 fue campeón en cuanto a la deforestación. Y hoy por hoy muchos países todavía se devanan o se largas discusiones para ver cómo paran la deforestación. Hoy por hoy nosotros decimos en Costa Rica que tenemos más bosque hoy que el que teníamos ayer, producto de ese montón o esas diferentes políticas positivas que hemos hecho con respecto a esto. Y eso significa no solamente que el gobierno ha impuesto esas cosas, sino que lo hacemos por convencimiento de nuestros campesinos, convencimiento de nuestros hermanos indígenas de que definitivamente el trabajo conjunto da buenos frutos, da buenos réditos, y yo creo que para nosotros eso es un ejemplo. ¿Qué son los grandes desafíos que nosotros visualizamos ahora que tenemos, digamos, de una u otra forma controlada la deforestación en nuestro país? Bueno, sabemos que existen otros ecosistemas importantes para la vida del planeta que tienen que ver con agricultura, que tienen que ver con ganadería, que tienen que ver con la recarbonización de los suelos, porque producto de muchas de las acciones que nosotros para cultivos o la extensión de la ganadería hemos hecho no correctamente, entonces tenemos que afinar esos detalles. Pero aquí el gran desafío es cómo pagarle a ese campesino, cómo pagarle a ese hermano indígena por las acciones positivas que realizan. Y definitivamente ante la situación que tenemos nosotros, muchos países como Costa Rica, con la situación fiscal, definitivamente es que necesitamos flujos financieros importantes para atender y financiar esas otras acciones. Entonces, en resumen, puedo decir, Costa Rica como tal, creo que ha sido muy exitoso en lo que hemos hecho en la parte forestal, muy exitoso en cuanto a la inclusión, muy exitoso en cuanto al trabajo conjunto con los campesinos, con los hermanos indígenas, con el involucramiento de la empresa privada. Pero también tenemos claro que si queremos tener un bosque saludable, tenemos que también que trabajar en esas otras áreas de la finca que no es bosque. Tenemos que trabajar con el campesino, tenemos que trabajar con el productor para que mejoren las prácticas agrícolas, las prácticas pecuarias, porque tenemos claro que si eventualmente ese uso o esa práctica que no es la mejor no le da los rendimientos financieros en cuanto a sus cultivos, en cuanto a su ganadería, lo primero que va a hacer es incluir al bosque, irlo a degradar, ir a a cacerías furtivas o las cacerías, y eso va en contra de lo que es la biodiversidad. Entonces, tenemos ese gran desafío, cómo incluir dentro de esos pagos o esos reconocimientos financieros esas acciones positivas que se dan en los bosques, por supuesto, que se tienen que dar en la agricultura y que se tienen que dar en la ganadería para realmente tener una explotación integral del paisaje rural y por supuesto que eso venga a repercutir positivamente en el aspecto financiero y en los ingresos que pueda tener una familia, que para el caso de Costa Rica, y creo que es la misma situación que tenemos en muchos países, son pequeños propietarios. Costa Rica, por bendición, decimos nosotros, es un país de pequeñas fincas. El 80% de las fincas del territorio nacional son menos de 20 hectáreas. Entonces tenemos que también que tener ese cuidado porque no es lo mismo el desarrollar políticas, el desarrollar prácticas cuando estamos hablando de grandes extensiones de terrenos. No, tenemos que trabajar también con ese campesino, ese pequeño y microproductor, porque las necesidades que ellos tienen es muy diferente a las necesidades que puede tener un productor con 1,000, 2,000 o 3,000 hectáreas. Bendiciones para Costa Rica, que realmente terratenientes para nosotros con grandes cantidades de terreno son muy pocas, podemos decir que son contados con los dedos de las manos, y sí también para nosotros también nos enorgullece mucho decir que los grandes terratenientes, para decirlo de alguna manera, son los hermanos indígenas. Costa Rica tiene 24 territorios indígenas. De esos 24 territorios indígenas son dueños como del 8% del territorio nacional, y yo creo que ese trabajo conjunto que estamos haciendo con ellos también va a permitir no solamente respetar su cosmovisión, sino también mejorar las condiciones de vida, y nosotros, no indígenas, aprender de esas prácticas ancestrales que han hecho y que por supuesto hoy por hoy Costa Rica se beneficia, en tanto consideramos que el ecoturismo, el ingreso por el turismo natural es lo que nos va a permitir a nosotros aspirar a ese desarrollo. Muchísimas gracias, Clea, lo dejo acá y por supuesto ahí podemos extender o ampliar cualquier concepto o cualquier idea que ustedes tengan a bien. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Jorge Mario. Gracias bueno, sé que es muy difícil resumir en 7 minutos lo que está pasando en Costa Rica, pero el mensaje es claro, es posible alinear y poner en práctica una infraestructura adecuada para cambiar la dinámica del sector. Y pues muchos dirán, ¿cuán replicable es la experiencia de Costa Rica? Pienso que esa es una pregunta que queda pendiente. Lo que hemos visto en un foro en el que hemos estado hace justamente 2 semanas en Costa Rica es que no es el único país. Hay 7 países en la región que están avanzando en diferentes niveles de avance, siguiendo los pasos de Costa Rica, y estas son buenas noticias que se deben seguir impulsando. Voy a hacer solo una última pregunta que te ruego respondas de manera más sucinta, de seguimiento, porque el otro tema que me parece que Costa Rica sí tiene mucho que mostrar es la coordinación intersectorial, cómo han coordinado con agricultura y con energía y con otros ministerios que hemos visto en otro de los bloques que se resaltan en la guía.
Sí, qué difícil es ser concreto con esas preguntas tan amplias, ¿verdad? Pero sí le voy a decir lo siguiente. En muchos países y en Costa Rica no fue la excepción. Generalmente nos veíamos al Ministerio de Agricultura y Ganadería adversando o como contrarios al Ministerio de Ambiente. De hace muchos años puedo decir que ya Costa Rica entendió de la mejor forma esa situación, y hoy por hoy tanto el Ministerio de Agricultura como el Ministerio de Ambiente tenemos una agenda agroambiental muy fuerte que trabajamos conjuntamente. Entonces yo creo que eso va a ayudar o nos está ayudando en mucho realmente a lograr esa producción de fincas integrales en donde el Ministerio de Ambiente aporta su conocimiento, aporta su expertise en lo que tiene que ver con los bosques, que tiene que ver con el manejo sostenible de los recursos naturales, y también el Ministerio de Agricultura en trabajo conjunto con los ingenieros y con nosotros, el Ministerio de Ambiente, estamos trabajando para que los agricultores utilicen la mayor tecnología y las mejores prácticas que vengan a beneficiar no solamente a nivel financiero el ingreso que tiene el productor, sino que se produzca, ojalá, más en menos área y que rinda muchísimo más para lograr mayor rendimientos financieros y por lo tanto mayores ingresos para ellos y que obviamente eso va a redundar en mejor calidad de vida. Entonces tenemos una agenda agroambiental muy fuerte, respetada y creada al más alto nivel, desde la Presidencia de la República, el Ministerio de Agricultura, el Ministro de Ambiente, y yo creo que eso nos permite a nosotros también aspirar a ese gran desafío que tenemos ya no solo de involucrar los incentivos a nivel forestal, sino también los incentivos en las mejores prácticas agrícolas y ganaderas de nuestros productores campesinos, indígenas y productores medianos. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Jorge Mario. Bueno, y con eso vamos a pasar ahora a Grace. I'm going to switch to English now. I'm going to switch. So please choose the channel for my Spanish-speaking colleagues. Let's switch back to English. Okay. So Grace, I would like you to talk about building block 2, social inclusive and gender responsive stakeholder engagement for NDC implementation. And again, in the forest and land use sector, there's many years of experience on developing guidance and setting up process, etc., at the global and the national level to ensure that FPIC, free, prior, and informed consent processes are applied in matters that affect indigenous people's rights. Do you think that we have moved forward in this regard? What are the lessons and observations that you can share with countries, and where do you see this is working, and what are the challenges that you see ahead?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm so happy to be here, an opportunity to meet some of old friends as well as new friends here. And yes, of course, we have been engaging in this process for some years now. And specifically, it is really important to ensure that FPIC process is being implemented in relation to all these NDC plans as well as other plans that are in relation to climate change actions. And yeah, as we all know, indigenous peoples and local communities are basically land-based people, and they are dependent on their lands, resources, and territories for their livelihoods. So in this situation, if we are going to have social inclusion as well as a gender responsive implementation, we have to be very sure on how important is the participation of indigenous peoples in the whole process. We have always said that indigenous peoples and local communities are not should not be treated as just beneficiaries in this process. They should be partners. We should be partners in the whole process, from the design to the implementation until the monitoring and evaluation of these climate change actions through the NDCs or the NAPs or other strategies that the countries have developed. Yes, and we know for a fact that indigenous peoples and local communities have been sustaining the remaining forests or biodiversity. And we know that they have their own traditional knowledge systems and sustainable management of these resources that is there. That's why it's really very important to undergo the process of FPIC. If we say FPIC, it's not just simply to get their consent, or yes, to get their consent or no consent in all of these climate change actions. But it is a basic right and and aligned with their self-determined decision-making process. And before they can make any decision, there should be really substantive disclosure of information, both benefits as well as the risks that they are supposed to face in the whole process. And as partners in the process, we should have very, the inclusivity should be very meaningful to all of them so that they can make their own collective decision, as well as shared responsibility on the ownership of implementation of the plan. And yes, as concrete examples, maybe I can just, over the years, we know that there had been policy changes, policy placement of some policies to recognize the rights and traditional knowledge systems of indigenous peoples. We have some examples cited in the report, in the NDC report that is already made, like in Cambodia, in Peru, in Ecuador, and the Philippines, of course. So having said that, I would like to just cite an example in the Philippines. We had been, of course, we have the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. That's why we have this legal framework to really also demand or assert our right to all these processes to undergo an FPIC. But it usually is not working so smoothly like that if the indigenous peoples do not really raise their voices and say we should be part of the process. We should be included in the process. So in the development of the Philippine NDC, in the first draft, at the same time in the ones they submitted already in 2021, we really asserted our participation. We have a CSO, a national CSO network on climate change in the Philippines, and we are part of that as indigenous, representing the indigenous peoples. And we had undergone a process of meeting the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to integrate some of our priorities and concerns in relation to even in the drafting of the NDCs. For the implementation, there is still some basic challenges on how this should be implemented with social inclusion of indigenous peoples and women and the youth. And we had been asserting that through the FPIC process, it should not just be information sharing and getting our decision, but it should be a process of really building our capacities, understanding what is this NDC and what are the other plans related to this, as well as on how we should be, what is our specific role and responsibility. And it's very important to have an ownership of the whole plan so that we can we can do our collective, we can share whatever collective responsibility that we will do in the implementation. And it's still undergoing a process. It's not very easy. And even if we have the legal framework, even if we have defined what we mean by FPIC, even if we have requested for financial support and technical support for our capacity building processes, we really had to, if you are not very active or proactive in demanding for that in our country, it's really not just offered by the government. So along the process, we requested for national, subnational, as well as national dialogues to really define how we should be participating in the whole process. And because this is still an ongoing process for the Philippines, as an example, I cannot really say that we are already, there is already a practice of full inclusivity. We are still, I don't know, but indigenous peoples are usually being still put aside if you are not so demanding or so assertive of your right to be part of the process. And we have also mentioned along the way, together with our other stakeholders and rights holders, that there should be an intergenerational learning session as well as engagement of women in the whole process. And this will build women empowerment, youth empowerment, at the same time in the development or training of second generation leaders from among the youth. And these are all well defined in the process wherein we should be engaging in. And so just to emphasize that because of the traditional knowledge systems of sustainable resource management, as well as in the recognition of indigenous value systems that are very important in the implementation, I would just like to emphasize again that that we need to scale this up in all of the processes that we are doing. Either these are climate change actions, either this is the NDC or aligned with the achievement of the sustainable development goals. So I think I'll end up there and maybe can get some questions for further discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Grace. And I think it's clear, well, it's also highlighted in several examples of the guidance that without that indigenous peoples are not the beneficiaries, as you say, they are partners, and without the proper engagement, participation, and FPIC, the targets in the land sector and other sectors will simply not be achieved. And I think I will highlight also from your intervention that there is already good examples of legal reforms that have taken place in several countries to ensure participation and consultation happens, and that's a product of early implementation in the sector and hopefully can be taken up by the broader NDC processes. I'm going to pass to our last panelist. I don't know if we can show her. Is she in? Oh, she's in Zoom. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see you on the screen. Good afternoon. And thank you so much for Dr. Jane and Guna for joining us from Kenya. We know there's been a very interesting process of NDC development in your country. Could you please tell us a little more of how the process has been conducted in terms of stakeholder engagement and inclusion and cross-sectoral coordination, and what also you're doing in terms of finance, which is other building block of this guidance. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is Kenya, 9 p.m. now. And I want to thank the organizers of the panel at this particular event for inviting me. I'm obviously sitting in or standing in for the person who would not make it. However, I would like to share my screen, if that is okay.
We can hear you.
Can you please enable me?
Can you share the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Jane.
I'm going to ask you to please try to do it in 5 minutes so we can keep the time. Thank you.
I should take less than 5 minutes. My name is Jane Guna. I'm the acting director of the Kenya Forestry Research Institute. This is the national institution mandated to undertake research in forestry and allied natural resources. And I was asked this to give a little highlights or talk a little on building block 2, on how Kenya has been able to engage a diverse set of stakeholders in NDC implementation. I want to start by saying that stakeholder engagement in Kenya is constitutional, is a constitution Constitution of Kenya 2010 allows or gives processes to all stakeholders that they must give in their views, irrespective whether it is the national government or the county government. All processes in Kenya are subjected to stakeholder participation. And in this article, it is understood that the people are the real authorities, and that whoever is in a position is holding the position in trust for the government and for the people, and therefore the decision that are supposed to be made are supposed to be also approved by the people. So naturally, then, that the NDC development process in Kenya has been very participatory, with a multi-stakeholder and cross-sectoral consultative process at various levels. Some of the examples that have been subjected to stakeholder engagement in this particular topic and in forestry is the National Climate Change Action Plan 2022, the Kenya National Adaptation Plan 2015 to 2030, and currently, as of last month, is Climate Change Amendment Act 2023. We've also undertaken a public participation process towards the lowering emission to accelerate finance in Kenya, a process that took us 2 years simply because the communities or the public did not understand it. And also the participation pays special recognition to women, to diverse groups, marginalized groups, women, youth, indigenous peoples, and local communities. We understand that the processes that are involved in this, the ministries are Ministry of Environment, Agriculture, Energy, and Transport that purely depend on land. So just to affirm what I'm saying is that these are just the articles that are in our constitution that recognize the various groups of people who must be included in any decision-making process. And recently, during the African Climate Summit 2023, it was very clear that the children and the youth declaration points were taken into account. Now, how do we involve communities? As I've said, therefore, communities are involved in a participatory manner, and the participation has actually been mainstreamed in project implementation, which needs to consider the needs of the people. We also have very nasty experiences where projects did not fully consider the people, and the projects have been either stopped or forsaken at all. Then the critical stakeholder steps involve the stakeholder mapping, the focus group discussion surveys, and these are held to align the project activities and intervention with the national and community needs. I come from the research institution, and every year we undertake a public participation process where we subject our research results to the public, and also we take that time to identify the priorities for research and development in the various ecological zones. Of course, you know, Kenya is very diverse, so one statement cannot fit all. And as my other colleagues have said, there's a free, prior, and informed concept with indigenous peoples is undertaken to that their needs are taken into account. And these groups have actually also sometimes stalled projects where they felt that they were not fully or adequately represented. The sectors that in this include agriculture, forestry, and energy that are involved in the NDC process. So through participation, we have come to some very tailor-made intervention in various areas, some of which include prioritized value chains led by women, like the grass reseeding in the drylands, which is important because the pastoralists depend a lot on the grasslands. The women own the small livestock, so reseeding drylands for them is important. The honey gums and resins and also the vegetable gardens are some of the projects that have come through the stakeholder engagement. Youth entrepreneurship and incubation and programs for the youth have also been extensively undertaken using stakeholder engagement. For my example of what we have done, we have a land restoration strategy, a 10-year project, which is aiming to accelerate restoration in Kenya, also towards contributing to the NDCs. It has been broken into 2 stages, each of 5 years, and has an 11 intervention strategy, which have been fully discussed and agreed upon by the various stakeholders. And this special program involves a whole of government and whole of society approach to restore the 10.6 million hectares of degraded lands in Kenya. And what we see in this program is that actually the country has given a target for each and every person, that is 300 trees per person over the 10 years. This also is still undergoing stakeholder participation before the final strategy is launched. In this strategy also, it identifies the critical roles played by the youth, and it has identified the need to employ the youth, the Green Army, to implement and track the progress of the strategy known as Green Army and Green Ambassadors. And finally, this 10-year campaign requires about USD 560 million. And we also understand that collaborations and partnerships from the public, private, international communities, state and non-state actors will be key for us to realize this goal. Thank you very much. A forest mycologist, that's why you see mushrooms there and some trees. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ninguna, for showing with those examples how the participatory process of NDC in the land sector in Kenya has yielded to a really concrete program with this ambitious plan, restoration plan, and hopefully with finance attached to it already, which will be key for making it happen. With that, we've closing the panel. I'm going to open now for a quick round of questions and interaction with the audience. We also have colleagues connected via Zoom, so we are welcome colleagues connected via Zoom to send your questions via the Q&A function of Zoom. And here, the audience, if you have any questions, this is the time. Okay, please. Is there a microphone there? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Sorry. So thank you so much to the presenters for the insightful presentations. So thank you so much. And I actually have two questions. One is for our colleague from Kenya. A few days ago, I was in an event or workshop where they were discussing that in Kenya, in order to address the issue about land tenure for some of the programs, they have used this new scheme or framework that basically focuses on tree tenure. And I wanted to get your views in terms of, you know, this proposal, and if it's something that would really address the issue of rights and the security that should be given to the indigenous peoples and those that are not only responsible basically for what is happening on the ground, but really to make sure that this is a long-term framework that will be useful for the future generations. So that's one point. The other question that I wanted to ask to the two speakers here in the room, you know, the intention, the relevance of inclusivity and gender equality and social inclusion, I've heard several times during your presentations, and of course I agree with that. That's what my work is on. But I wanted to ask, what do you think that it really takes to scale up, you know, this work from the national to the global levels, because we do see more representation from youth and from indigenous peoples at different levels. But how do we make sure that we change our mindset from beneficiaries to really agents of change? So thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Dr. Jane, can we start with you?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's quite interesting, and land issues in Kenya are quite emotive. However, I understood that there is the issue of the land tenure and the tree tenure in Kenya, and the rights and securities to the indigenous peoples. I wish to say that the Kenya Constitution recognizes several types of land tenure. There is a private, there is a public, there is a where public can be national, can be county government, and can also be community land. And therefore, there are specific acts that govern how these various levels of land are governed and how they are utilized. In terms of the Constitution also recognizes the rights of the indigenous peoples and where they can stay. But what has been debated, and I'm not sure it is yet complete, is a tree tenure. Do they own the trees or do they own the land? Because what they are allowed within the areas that they occupy, they are allowed to use the resources. But in terms of removing the resources, they do not have the rights as at yet. That is what I know. Is a debate that is going on in terms of the tree tenure, but they can occupy that land. They can do their various activities, non-extractive activities, but the tree tenure is not yet completed.
Thank you. And we'll pass to the second question now that was for the panelists in terms of scaling up social inclusion and inclusivity from national to global levels. What is, and change the mindset from beneficiaries to agents of change.
Sí, muchas gracias. Y muy interesante la pregunta. Yo creo que, bueno, lo que voy a contar es lo que hemos vivido en Costa Rica. Nosotros definitivamente hemos aprendido muchísimo de cómo tiene que establecerse el diálogo particularmente con los territorios indígenas, y también hemos, producto de toda esta fase de preparación en cuanto a lo que es la inclusión de género, también hemos aprendido muchísimo. ¿Qué es lo primero que nosotros hicimos con nuestros hermanos indígenas? Bueno, primero es ponerles la situación que nosotros como no indígenas tal vez lo veíamos como una oportunidad, y fue un proceso constructivo donde el gobierno como tal hizo caso o atendió las necesidades que los hermanos indígenas nos dijeron en cuanto a los temas que ellos querían discutir, en cuanto a cómo era la forma de trabajar que ellos habían establecido, y una serie de cosas importantes que nosotros, digamos, los no indígenas, no teníamos suficiente claridad de cómo abordarlo. Entonces, ¿qué fue lo que hicimos? Lo que hicimos fue reunirnos a ellos y particularmente, digamos, capacitarlos. Y cuando hablamos de capacitar en estos temas, no es solamente que yo, Jorge Mario Rodríguez, iba a exponerles de cuál era la situación, sino que también ellos mismos definieron cómo iba a ser el asunto. Y las primeras cosas que nos dijeron, bueno, primero, muchos no saben leer. Lo segundo es que muchos no hablan el idioma. Entonces, una de las cosas que Costa Rica invirtió muchísimo es en la formación y en la creación de los mediadores culturales, para que capacitándolos a ellos pudieran en su mismo idioma irles a transmitir a los demás hermanos del territorio. Yo creo que eso fue una lección aprendida muy importante, y yo creo que eso es lo que como país podemos decir que generó mucha confianza en el proceso. En cuanto a la inclusión de las mujeres, bueno, también igual que la mayor parte del planeta, desgraciadamente en Costa Rica apenas el 15% de las tierras son propiedades de mujeres. Y una de las cosas es la invisibilidad que tienen las mujeres, y particularmente en la zona rural. Entonces también nos propusimos crear todo el plan de acción de género. Nos propusimos identificar a esos grupos de mujeres que en la zona rural estaban con algún grado de organización, apoyarlas a ellos en cuanto a la formalización de esa sociedad o de esa organización o asociación, y particularmente invitarlas a ellas, como lo hemos hecho, desde hace unos años para acá, a todos estos diálogos que tienen que ver con la el concepto de género, la inclusión de la mujer, de los jóvenes, y yo creo que eso ha sido parte de la fortaleza y de la riqueza que nosotros hemos desarrollado en este proceso de construcción. Obviamente que todavía faltan muchas cosas por hacer, muchas cosas que mejorar, pero creo que aquí lo importante es que, al igual que lo dije en un principio, hemos hecho cosas, ¿verdad? No esperando hacia en el largo plazo a ver qué sucede, sino hemos hilado cosas pequeñas que eventualmente nos van a proporcionar grandes cosas, y yo creo que en eso es lo que hemos trabajado nosotros como país. Gracias.
Gracias, Jorge Mario. May I switch to Grace and ask you to focus on the second part of the question. Have we really started changing the narrative from beneficiaries to agents of change at a global level? What is missing, and how we can do better?
Yes. Yeah, regarding that question, it's interesting to really go back to yeah, it's more on really develop what they call capacity building for indigenous peoples or the young people, younger generation. And I have mentioned a while ago that we are I think it's an inherent practice of indigenous peoples to do intergenerational knowledge sharing among the elders, the youth, the women knowledge holders, and the youth. And at the same time, we have been conducting trainings in relation to yes, as I mentioned a while ago, to developing second generation leaders. And of course, it's basically doing direct engagement in their own communities, then bring this up into some engagement at subnational and national levels before they can go to the global level. And as it is a two-way capacity building and transformation. We only do not do the trainings with the indigenous peoples and the youth, but we also do it with the policy makers. And we usually conduct dialogues with government agencies, with who are supposed to be implementing these policies, these climate change actions, and come up with some agreed strategies or plans on how we should be developing each other's understanding, what indigenous peoples and the young people should be learning about, at the same time understanding what indigenous peoples are saying, are insisting on being partners in the development process. So it is a two-way process, a two-way learning process. At the same time, we start from the community level because that's where we are, and then bring them up to subnational and national level exchanges with the different stakeholders. And that's how we develop really this the development of indigenous of young people to be in the whole process of as agents of change. We are always saying that we are the older generation now of leaders, and I don't think most of us will be here by 2030 or 2050 when we want to achieve all of our goals. So we really have to be very serious in training the younger generation to take on the responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. How important horizontal, bottom-up capacity building, changing the narrative, and stopping to use the term beneficiaries. I fully agree. We should eliminate that from the vocabulary. Are there some questions from online? No. We don't have more questions. Any more questions from the audience here?
Others can share as well.
Anybody would like to have an intervention, a comment about the building blocks, or what do you have from the audience? No. All right. So I think we're leaving. Yeah, no. Okay. Sorry, Tara, go ahead. Yes, please.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot for the presentations. We talked a bit about integrating different aspects of policy, and I'd love to hear from you about how you see the integration of the biodiversity frameworks and the climate change frameworks, particularly now following the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, and a really crucial moment to be governments are developing their updated national biodiversity strategies and action plans. They're also developing BSAP. So how do you see the integration of those processes and the challenges and opportunities there?
Who would like to answer that?
Bueno,
Sí.
para nosotros que estamos relacionados particularmente o que he venido a contar un poco la historia, lo que tiene que ver con los bosques, para nosotros es inseparable hablar de lo que es bosques y hablar de lo que es biodiversidad. Y eso particularmente quedó muy bien reflejado en la intervención de nuestro señor ministro ahora en Montreal, en la COP de biodiversidad, en donde ya particularmente ya giró las instrucciones necesarias para aún fortalecer aún más todo lo que tienen que hacer en el proceso de políticas nacionales que tienen que ver con el desarrollo para poner o fortalecer el componente biodiversidad en todas estas líneas temáticas. Particularmente les cuento que en este caso del Fondo Nacional de Financiamiento Forestal, donde yo soy el director, he recibido instrucciones precisas del señor ministro para modificar y hablar del PSA 3.0 en estos momentos, en donde una de las intenciones fuertes que tiene el señor ministro y que la idea es que ahora para el próximo año 2024 tenga un componente bien importante, cuánto es ese beneficio o ese pago que se le da a los productores, particularmente por la protección de la biodiversidad que se está dando. Y aquí estamos hablando de biodiversidad no solamente de los bosques, sino también del agropaisaje, porque tenemos claro que muchos de los productos agrícolas tienen que ver con lo que es la polinización. La polinización también tiene que ver con la salud de los ecosistemas y particularmente en el caso de Costa Rica tenemos un buen mapa de lo que son los corredores biológicos, que son los que interconectan las áreas silvestres protegidas, y ahí es donde el señor ministro nos ha instruido para que podamos meter bastantes acciones para recuperar áreas donde su vocación sea meramente forestal o en su efecto mejorar, ya sea con arborización, con regeneración, con recuperación de esas áreas para favorecer en ello la biodiversidad, porque entendemos que la biodiversidad es parte de la vida del planeta y que sin ella probablemente la crisis que nosotros estamos viviendo ahora de cambio climático, si no le ponemos suficiente atención a lo que es biodiversidad, probablemente va a ser catastrófico como lo estamos previendo desde ya. Gracias.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Jorge Mario. And with that, I'm going to thank my distinguished panelists. Thank you so much for your participation. And we're just going to close by summarizing what we've heard. I think we like to highlight that the guidance is not a document. This is just a roadmap and a pathway. It's not just a publication, and we and UNDP are coming out of this with homework to do, which is customize the recommendations of the guidance to the country level and keep supporting through our existing portfolio and with other parties in really putting in practice what we've heard, because this is the time of action. And clearly the very important lessons that we've heard in terms of free, prior, and informed consent, EFIC not being just about consultation and changing the narrative on real indigenous people's participation in this process is critical. And will be important to expand these lessons from the forest sector, where we've done, I think, a lot of the homework, to the other sectors, if we are to really meet the commitments that we heard during this week. With that, I'm gonna invite to our funders, the UK government, who has been supporting very generously this process of supporting in this implementation through the land use and forest sector. And I'm going to invite to Dr. Will Lockhart to give his closing remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. I won't talk for too long. It's lovely to be here. I'm from the UK. It's always very difficult to talk at the end of an event, not least when we, we've got a lot of events this week, but it's doubly difficult at the end of this event because I thought that was just such a fantastically interesting discussion. I don't possibly know how to follow it up, but I want to say huge thanks to Jorge, muchas gracias, to Jane and Grace. That was really interesting. And thank you to Cassie, Charlotte and Clea as well, who've done so much sort of work getting us through the program today. But thanks to you, right? This has been a really big piece of work and a long time coming. And I think everyone who's been involved in this process, it's been a huge collaborative effort. And I think that really shows in the quality of the product that's come out the other side. So thank you to all of you. The United Kingdom was absolutely delighted to give £9 million to Climate Promise. And I think you can see now that was really a very good investment, a very, very sensible investment for all of us. We're absolutely delighted to see what's come out the other end. I mean, it's quite common nowadays, isn't it, to sort of hear people talk about the interaction between the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. And it's good. It's good that we hear people talking about that. People weren't talking about that a few years ago. But I feel like it sort of opens up another question, another frontier, which is, well, how do we tackle those crises together? What do we do? It really opens up this point that we have choices to make, right? We have to make difficult choices. We have, as countries or as custodians of land, we have a certain amount of that land, and we have to make difficult trade-offs and choices about what use we put that land to, whether we want to change the use of the land, how our land use plans and programs will change over time. And that's even before we get into the conversation about NDCs and MBSAPs and adaptation plans and mitigation plans. I think that this roadmap, right, because it's not a standalone piece of sort of frozen guidance, but this roadmap really starts to open up those choices for us and really starts to help us explore those. And I love the themes of partnerships, collaboration, inclusion, capacity building, monitoring, finance. These are the themes that we hear so often, and they're just so critical, right, to all of the work that we do. I think, my message really is very simple. If you haven't looked at it yet, read it, right? Read it, use it, share it, get out there, talk about it. And I think most importantly, tell us how we can make it better, right? It's a roadmap. It's going to evolve. It's going to change. We've already heard about experience of using it on the ground. And as you get out there and use it in real programs and real world situations, you will learn more, which we want to share with other people. That's the point of the platform. That's the point. So please bring it back to us. Share it, improve it. Tell us your experiences. Time is running out, right? That's it's brutal. Time is running out, and there's so much more to do, but moments like this, I think, and sort of guidance like this, exchanges like this, collaboration like this, really, I think, shows us that there's still a lot of hope and there's still a lot of opportunity. So let's get out there and make it happen. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone at Climate Promise. Thank you.